Thank you all for joining us today to hear how UPMC and the University of Pittsburgh are leading worldwide efforts to rapidly validate clinical therapies for COVID-19. First, Dr. Don Yealy, UPMC's Chair of Emergency Medicine, will update you on the results of our testing here in Pittsburgh and regionally, and what our data reveals about the spread of COVID-19 in our communities. Then Dr. Derek Angus, Chair of the Department of Critical Care Medicine at UPMC and the University of Pittsburgh, will describe how an innovative clinical trial he developed is being deployed here and worldwide so that clinicians and researchers are rapidly testing and adapting multiple therapies at the same time to save COVID-19 patients. After our experts give a few brief remarks, we will take your questions. Dr. Yealy.
Thank you very much, and I thank all of you who signed on today to continue to help inform everyone that we serve about the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly here in Western Pennsylvania. It's been nearly a month now since our city, our region, and our communities throughout Pennsylvania, New York, Maryland, and Ohio, all of which are served by UPMC, began to implement social distancing to combat the spread of COVID-19. Earlier this week, America was warned that this would be our Pearl Harbor, this would be our worst week. I'm pleased to report that based on all of the activities, the social distancing and your participation and other public health measures, it looks like we've flattened the curve. While COVID-19 infections are here in the communities that UPMC serves, and it's growing, the number of people seeking and receiving care is increasing, but we're not seeing the spikes or the surges that have been seen in other parts of the country. In fact, one of the more credible models that help predict what type of activity we could expect, the University of Washington's Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation model, it suggests that the number of cases and the need for ICU beds in Pennsylvania will peak this weekend. Today's April 9th, and we have not seen yet that dramatic, overwhelming surge in COVID-19 patients that we prepared for and that we feared. We are seeing evidence that the pandemic is growing, but we see the possibility for a manageable future with no very high surge here in Western Pennsylvania. Taken together, these facts will help inform many public health decisions that need to be made in the next weeks to come. Across the UPMC system, we've performed 7,376 tests for COVID-19 illness and infection, and 592 have been positive. That's a positivity rate of 8%. This rate hasn't changed appreciably over the past few weeks. We now have specimen centers set up in 9 different locations to help gain those samples and make sure that we're serving our UPMC communities. We are not seeing high positivity rates in any one of those areas, despite we prioritizing people with symptoms. In Harrisburg, we've tested 342 samples from 2 different sites, and the positivity rate is 12%. In Williamsport, Pennsylvania, we've tested 181 samples. The positivity rate is 1%. In Erie, Pennsylvania, 271 samples have been tested, and the positivity rate is 4%. And in Altoona, Pennsylvania, 209 samples have been sent and tested, and 4% are positive. Right now, across all of UPMC, we have 97 inpatients who are positive for the COVID-19 illness, and they're being safely cared for without difficulty. Many do not need intensive care beds or ventilators. 53 of those patients are in southwestern Pennsylvania, 26 are in central Pennsylvania at our Pinnacle hospitals, and the rest are in northwestern Pennsylvania, south central Pennsylvania, or in our Maryland hospital. Our hospitals have plenty of beds and plenty of capacity should we need to take care of more patients, including COVID-19 infected patients. We have an ample supply of masks, gloves, gowns, and respirators to do this safely. We've launched innovative efforts to conserve all of our equipment so that we can maintain the supply into the future. These efforts include sterilization processes to make sure that we can safely continue to use N95 masks, you've heard about those, to help protect our employees. We also have partnerships with local universities to use 3D printing to make thousands of nasal swabs. That's the device that helps get the media, the specific specimen, to test for COVID-19. That allows us to keep testing at the highest levels possible. We have protective equipment, we have testing capabilities, and we work closely with the county and state health officials and with other healthcare providers in the region to make sure that we have the best information to inform policymaking about the next steps. We seek to share our robust expertise, our capabilities, and that's something that you would expect of a world-class medical center and something that we'll deliver for you. One of these groundbreaking innovations that I'm most excited about will be explained by my partner, Dr. Derek Angus. Dr. Angus.
Thanks, Don. So, we can bring into our hospitals and our ICUs patients who are sick with COVID-19, and we, like many other institutions around the world, can provide supportive care. But the problem with COVID-19 is that no one has any specific treatment for the disease itself. What that's led to is that clinicians, public health officials, scientists, and patients essentially think there's two paths. One path is the just do it option. Take therapies that we think might work, for example, anti-malarial drugs, and give those therapies to patients essentially on a hunch. Why not try it? At the same time, other people say, no, wait a minute, we have to learn. We have to learn if the therapy works, and that means that we need to test these therapies in randomized clinical trials. And this is set up as a tension. You must choose either one path or the other. We at UPMC have been thinking about there has to be a middle road or another way where we can try to learn efficiently while also taking care of patients as best as we can at the same time. And so that's what we're proposing through a strategy that involves a new kind of clinical trial based on artificial intelligence. Although we don't have a treatment, there are hundreds of potential ideas. Already there are hundreds of clinical trials that have been registered around the world. There's over 100 clinical trials we could try even here. These are testing all sorts of therapies, such as you've heard about hydroxychloroquine, other antiviral agents, corticosteroids, or other drugs that can help the body's immune system to fight the infection. And the list goes on and on. All of these therapies normally would just be tested in these traditional randomized clinical trials where patients are randomized to either get the drug or the other half get no drug whatsoever. All of them take a long time. They're only usually done in large university hospitals, and we do not have the luxury of time. We must try to learn while doing. So back in 2015 here at UPMC, we developed and started talking about a new way of doing clinical trials that allow us to simultaneously test multiple treatments faster and with fewer patients. This is using a design called a remap, which is a randomized but embedded multifactorial adaptive platform, which is a load, but the name is a remap. Remaps are a form of so-called adaptive platform trials, and this form of doing trials has been gaining a lot of popularity in recent years. Remap is maybe the most flexible of all in that it allows us to keep rolling in and testing multiple therapies over time. So today we are launching at UPMC Remap COVID. This is part of an international clinical trial that will fast-track the identification of potential therapies for COVID-19. We will simultaneously be testing combinations of the anti-malarial drug, hydroxychloroquine, along with different combinations of corticosteroids, and then rolling in other more targeted immune system modulatory drugs. What makes this particularly powerful, we believe, at UPMC is that we're taking this remap design and we're embedding it in our electronic health record that we have running across the entire UPMC system. First of all, so that then any patient hitting any of our hospitals has the opportunity to be in this trial. And then furthermore, so that we can then have immediate data, access to the data real time. So how this works, when a patient is admitted with severe COVID-19 to any of our institutions, if they consent to participate in the trial, they are immediately assigned randomly to different recipes of treatments. Only one of those recipes has only the standard of care in it, and nearly all the recipes are including at least one of these active therapies. Furthermore, then the trial continues to update over time. I'll explain what that means in a minute, but doing this at the point of care saves time. It's specifically designed in a way that makes it efficient in the setting of COVID-19 when everyone is under PPE and everyone is trying to do things quickly. We have to have this happen efficiently and safely. UPMC Remap COVID then learns on the fly using a built-in artificial intelligence engine, such that within this combination of therapies, those treatments that are doing the best, even while the trial is still running, the trial then changes the odds towards getting those treatments more frequently. So the poor performing therapies are discarded quickly, and essentially our physicians are always betting on the winning horse. With this approach, the trial ends faster, fewer patients are exposed, and we have a finding that is statistically significant, and the best treatments are given to the most patients right out of the gate. This is a complicated effort to pull off, and there are definitely challenges to do this kind of design. The fact that we've got to this point so quickly has only been because of a huge effort from many parts of UPMC. I just want to particularly thank Rob Bart and everyone in our IT team and our e-record team who have done an amazing job to move all the machinery of this trial inside the electronic health record. That he's done in partnership with Oscar Marroquin, who directs our clinical analytics. And then the rollout of this trial is entirely on the shoulders of my colleagues in pulmonary and critical care medicine, in emergency medicine, in infectious disease, and my partners in critical care, together with the support of Tammy Muneer and all of our quality improvement specialists inside the Wolf Center. And then I should also say that it would be impossible without the partnership from our colleagues in pharmacy and our system-wide pharmacy and therapeutics committee. This trial ties into an international trial that we helped design and lead. And just to give you a flavor of how this trial is being perceived, the Chief Medical Officer of the British National Health Service last week sent out a letter encouraging every hospital in Britain to participate in this trial. We feel we need a big tent approach in the United States. We've heard from government and regulatory authorities, from public health authorities, and from major foundations that are all endorsing that these types of adaptive platform trials are the way to try to learn efficiently in the midst of this pandemic. We are encouraged by the initial interest that we've received from peer healthcare systems worldwide, and we're hoping to bring more hospitals on so that we can generate robust answers even more quickly. And so I would say, if you have COVID-19, we already believe that there is no better place to seek that care than at UPMC, where we believe we provide world-class innovative care, and this is one more strategy in which we're trying to make sure that any of our patients hitting any part of our healthcare system immediately have access to the most innovative therapies. And with that, happy to take questions.
Thank you, doctors. And now we'll take questions from the media, all of whom are joining us online. To ask a question, you'll have to go to the participants icon at the bottom of the page and press the Raise Your Hand button. That will put you in the queue. I will read your name, and your line will be unmuted for you to ask your question. We will try to call on as many different media outlets as we can in the time that we have allotted. The first question is a question that was emailed to us earlier from WFMJ TV in Youngstown, Ohio. And Dr. Angus, what has been the most effective COVID-19 therapy you've seen so far?
So that's the point. We don't know. So there really are hundreds of therapies. You have heard about, in particular, I'm sure, about hydroxychloroquine. Hydroxychloroquine is an antimalarial drug based on quinine. Quinine is what's in gin and tonic, and quinine has been used for malaria for hundreds of years. And I should say that people were already trying antimalarial quinine-based drugs for viral pneumonias in 1919. We have these epidemics. People have ideas. They try to treat people, but they can't work out if it actually made a difference. So I'm here to tell you, I don't know what will work best. I have personal hope that some of the antivirals will help a little bit, but I think we will also need to help the immune system have a more favorable response. And the correct answer is probably going to be a combination of therapies that we haven't even tried yet.
This comes from Bill Kibler at the Altoona Mirror. Does UPMC have a comment on Governor Wolf's order to reallocate PPEs and other medical equipment? Dr. Ely?
UPMC has already complied and provided the information that's been requested in the governor's order. The governor's order initially wants to assess what equipment is available to help treat patients. We've been supplying that information 3 times a day, like many institutions across the Commonwealth. We'll continue to do that and fully comply with the governor's requests. We look forward to assisting in every way possible based on what we need here to take care of patients and also to help others provide care. We're fully committed to improving the health of all in the Commonwealth and complying with any governmental regulation or request.
Okay. Another question comes from Tom Averill of the Philadelphia Inquirer, who asks, are patients blinded and what effect might that have? Dr. Angus?
So this is a technical question about how trials are conducted, where patients are sometimes masked to what's being assigned. So because these are complex recipes, we don't try to give a placebo drug for every single possibility. So for example, you could be assigned to 4 or 5 drugs. So you can imagine the box of pills, of sugar pills, just becomes unwieldy. So this trial runs using what's called an open label design. So they're randomized, but they're not swallowing sugar pills.
Okay. Thank you. We have another email question. This probably goes to Dr. Ely. Since you are not seeing a surge in COVID-19 patients, is UPMC planning any change in its operations?
Well, as you noted, there is not only not a surge around here, there's a growth in patients, but not the spikes that we've seen in other hotspots like New York, Detroit, New Orleans. So we are seeing a growth, and we're handling those easily right now. We also know that patients have changed their behavior. They have sought less care. They will eventually need that care, and UPMC is fully committed to providing that care for patients as they need it and when they need it. Just like when we dialed back on the care, we are carefully thinking about the changes that eventually will happen and how it is we can help re-engage more people, more patients as they have their needs met. We're committed to providing the health care that's needed today, tomorrow, and next week, and we'll respond to the conditions on the ground that we're experiencing.
Thank you. We have another email question. What should public health officials be doing right now, given the low number of cases we're seeing here? Dr. Ely?
I think we're still in the early and learning phases of what COVID-19 is going to ultimately be like here in Western Pennsylvania. We have some early peaks that, while it's growing, it does not look like those hotspots we talked about. I think our public health officials should continue to collect information, work together with the health care providers, and then jointly decide how it is our response will evolve. I don't think it means that we will stop doing any types of efforts to control the spread of the virus, but I think those efforts will mature and will allow different and more types of interaction over time. That change probably won't happen this week or next, but I think we'll continue to integrate our experiences and the experiences around the country and the healthcare systems together with public health officials craft the next set of plans. Those plans have been enacted in other parts of the world. We want to learn from them and do it even better here.
Thank you. Next question comes from Oliver Morrison at Public Source. Will UPMC have enough COVID patients to generate meaningful data for the new remap? Will it rely on others joining the larger system? Dr. Angus?
So what we've really done that we've been very focused on has been embedding this remap inside our EHR so that it scales across our entire network. But the trial itself, we've also designed with colleagues at major universities around the world. And so patients are being enrolled already, and they're being enrolled in 13 countries. The way our inner engine, the statistical engine of this trial works, is that it then takes the data from the entire world and then updates the probabilities of assignment so that when a patient turns up at Passivant and is being randomized, the recipe they are assigned is based on information that we've been receiving from patients that have been enrolled in London, in Amsterdam, and in Sydney.
Let's try Shannon Perrine at WTAE TV. Shannon?
It looks like I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Shannon. Please go ahead.
Oh, fabulous. Fabulous. Thanks for talking with us today. So has this kind of approach of getting new therapies out there and working, has that ever been done before, even on a smaller scale, anywhere in the world?
You're asking me, I presume. So this approach of using adaptive platforms is not what people ever did normally, but it is totally what many groups now want to do. And by many groups, I mean, for example, the FDA. So when we were designing this design, for example, we have been in discussion with individuals such as Janet Woodcock, who is in charge of CEDAR, one of the branches for drug approvals at the FDA. The WHO has endorsed that these types of adaptive platform trials are the most suited, especially in the pandemic setting. And similarly, the Gates Foundation has said that they want to primarily support these type of adaptive platform programs. I fully get that most of the world has been running on these traditional randomized trials, and it's all we've ever heard for decades. But what we're working on and what we're very committed to is being completely endorsed by really some very major figures in other parts of the biomedical scientific community.
And if I can add, other parts of medicine have used this exact trial design. What's novel is usually not in the acute care space. So we're not the first to actually consider the design. We're the first to consider it in this particular deployment. And we think this is where it has its highest utility, to get to the most appropriate answers as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
Thank you. We'll go back to the media joining us remotely online and try John Shumway, KDKA TV. John, go ahead.
Dr. Angus, obviously with people dying every day, I certainly understand you saying we do not have the luxury of time. So can you give us a qualification of rapidly? You said you wanted to rapidly identify the treatments that work best and then get those treatments to the patients. For families who have someone sick right now, and for those of us who could get sick in the near future, give us a quantification of rapidly. How soon are we going to see some results from this?
Right. So it comes down to how many patients are enrolled in the program. On average, we can reach definitive conclusions about any individual therapy only after several hundred patients have been enrolled. Having said that, I want to emphasize to you that the trial is essentially taking bets even before it knows definitively so that therapies that are on their way to winning, even before they've fully declared at the point that we would then say to a major medical journal or to the FDA, aha, this therapy is best. That therapy that is most likely to be doing well is already the therapy that gets steered most often towards patients. So there's what you're asking is, when does the uncertainty switch from being uncertain to completely knowing? To completely know an answer with a high degree of certainty can still take weeks or months, depending on how rapidly patients are enrolled. But with every notch in the reduction in uncertainty, the trial then converts that reduction in uncertainty into improved odds for the patient. So even before we've got to the end trial result, we're already offering opportunities where on average patients will be doing better inside the trial than out of the trial.
Thank you. Next question, Aaron Martin, WPXI. Aaron, go ahead.
So this is for Dr. Angus. This is following up on John's question a little bit. You were talking about how the different therapies could be switching quickly. When patients who receive one therapy that wasn't showing as much success, could they be switched after some time to a therapy that is showing more success?
So it's a great question. Right now, this still behaves as a relatively short-run individual course for individual patients, where therapies are only running days. And the most rapidly that we would be getting updates are maybe weekly. So the design in COVID-19 wouldn't then change the therapy for the individual patient currently. That question generally is a question that can definitely be used when studying more chronic diseases with this design, where if new information is learned by the trial, you can actually switch within patient.
Thank you. Again, to ask a question, go to the bottom of your page and press the icons button, and then press the raise your hand button. That'll put you in the queue. We will unmute you, make sure you are unmuted as well, and we'll go from there. Next question, Jamie Martinez, Tribune Review. Jamie, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Angus, you mentioned that this is a complicated system to roll out. So what are those challenges and what could potentially go wrong?
So the first thing is, as all of you have seen, any patient with COVID-19, first of all, everyone is trying to do things quickly when they first reach the hospital. Secondly, everyone is trying to operate already draped under PPE. So what we're working out is how efficiently we can actually bring in video links into that moment so that the patient or the patient's family member can be fully explained on the consenting process and give consent. And there are numerous little logistic issues about actually pulling off that moment so that we can absolutely ensure that patients and or their family members are fully informed about the trial design. All of that takes a little bit of time. All of it involves a little bit of IT support to pull it off. We have it all designed, but we're still going to learn and fine-tune exactly how that rolls out. As far as the inner complexity of the trial design, that we have totally sorted. We have already got the inner guts of how the artificial intelligence algorithm does the updates, the data safety and monitoring board that reviews the data. We have all of that fixed, and then our colleagues in pharmacy have made sure that, for example, we have 20,000 doses of hydroxychloroquine available. So many of those logistics we already have tackled.
Next question, David Templeton, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. David?
Two questions. Will Highmark patients have access to this? And my second question would be one of what's called convalescent plasma. Something like that, would those types of treatments be included?
So we'll split the answers. With respect to your first question, will those who are insured by Highmark, I'll expand your question into any other insurer, will they have access? They have access to care at UPMC already, and there's nothing about instituting this particular trial design that would change that. We are ready to care for those who need care, and under the current conditions, as you're aware, Highmark, UPMC Health Plan, others have decided that they're expanding their access and allowing patients the freedom to choose the site that they want to go to. So we don't anticipate that being a problem here.
And then the second question was about convalescence serum. So convalescence serum, we're very excited to roll out convalescence serum as soon as we have it. And I think there's going to be more later next week about that, but I can reassure you that as soon as convalescent serum is a product that we are ready to test in patients, that will be a perfect example of one of the therapies that we will be rolling into this program.
Thank you. Next question, Colleen Knudsen from WTAG TV in Johnstown. Sorry. Go ahead, Colleen.
Thank you. I just have two quick questions. Dr. Angus, you said that patients with severe COVID-19 symptoms who are admitted into the UPMC system can enroll in this trial. Can you define what severe symptoms are? And is there a possibility maybe in the near future where positive patients who are self-quarantining, not necessarily in the hospital, can enroll in this trial and get access to this therapy, possibly through like an outpatient trial?
So that's a fantastic question. So I said earlier on, there are hundreds of trials and there are hundreds of theories about COVID-19. So when we designed this trial, we had to simplify it down to some broad structure. So the way the trial runs right now, we are launching in the testing of therapies for all patients deemed sick enough to be admitted to the hospital. And then they're further subdivided into those who are admitted to the hospital and are very sick, going to the ICU for breathing difficulties, maybe needing ventilatory support, versus need to come into the hospital but not quite that sick. We're calling those patients moderate. So we basically divided the whole spectrum of COVID into a severe and then a moderate. And then what you're talking about is that third level down at the bottom, mild. The interventions we're leading with right now, and because of where we encounter the patients, we're focusing on moderate and severe. But we are totally having conversations about how can we then pivot in a later issue of this platform to think about how we can then roll out interventions into the mild group, as you suggest.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. Paul Goff, Pittsburgh Business Times. Paul, go ahead.
Thank you. Dr. Yili, you mentioned, I think, 53 patients in southwestern PA that have been hospitalized for COVID-19. Is that centered at one hospital in particular? I'm thinking of, like, are you deploying one particular hospital which specializes in COVID-19, or is it across, many separate hospitals?
Those 53 inpatients in southwestern PA UPMC sites are spread out through many of our facilities. We have not chosen to have a singular or a concentrated site for COVID-19 care. What we've done is increase the capacity and the capabilities across the entire system. So it's spread out. As you might imagine, it's not equivalently spread because people live nearby and come to different facilities. Right now, UPMC Passivant and UPMC Presbyterian in southwestern Pennsylvania would have the highest exposure of UPMC hospitals.
Thank you. Next question, Jessica Haberly, WTOV TV in Steubenville, Ohio. Jessica, go ahead.
Good morning, and thank you for your work. I was wondering, with the projected peak being this weekend that you're no longer anticipating, is the current data suggesting another peak down the road? And beyond that, I'm also curious if there is any suggestions for those who are recovering at home and suffering at home. What medical advice do you give them?
So let me tackle the first. There are lots of models, and every one is right and every one is wrong at the same moment in time. And so I don't actually know when the peak will happen, how long the peak will be, and how high it will be, and no one who has a model knows the answer to that question yet. We know one prediction was the peak would be this weekend. I hope it is this weekend, and I hope it's not as bad as we all feared. We prepared for much more. There are other models that would predict much higher peaks, much longer peaks, and at different times. We're ready to be vigilant for weeks to months and even longer if necessary. Next week is just one model's version of that. I hope it's the right one, but I don't know that now. The second question was, remind me?
Stay-at-home treatment.
Oh, stay-at-home treatment. I think keep doing the same things that you're doing right now, which is continuing the isolation, adhering to the simple things, distance, hand hygiene, a mask when you're around others. The simple things still drive prevention of illness and recovery from illness. It's not any more complicated than that. This is not the time to stop any of that because our peak hasn't been so high or that many people that we're caring for are going back home. This is the time to stay the course.
Thank you. Next question is from Kathy Ann Kowalski from Science News, and she asked via email for Dr. Angus, how did your team get the idea to use this approach versus other more traditional approaches that are used to respond to health issues?
So I'd love to tell you I just had the idea in a moment of brilliance. This idea came after H1N1. The world moved rapidly to identify the virus in H1N1. Within weeks, the basic science of the virus was totally understood. And yet the entire worldwide clinical research community couldn't find any therapies for H1N1. Everyone scrambled to do traditional clinical trials, and by the time they got them up and running, H1N1 had left their region and gone somewhere else. And so I was part of a group of scientists from around the world who sat down afterwards and said, what did we do wrong, and how can we do this better? And after an initial meeting in Toronto in 2011, we were actually funded by the British Embassy for funding innovation between American and British scientists to run a meeting in Pittsburgh in 2012, where we brought scientists from around the world to think about how can we have a better structure for asking clinical questions in pandemics in the future. And that actually led to the birth of this REMAP concept.
Okay, next question comes from Michael Wachowski from Next Pittsburgh. Michael, go ahead.
How does machine learning and artificial intelligence factor into the REMAP project?
So these are becoming quite technical questions, which I could happily spend hours with you on, but I'm being told not to. Don't worry, I won't. The most classic form of a type of machine learning called reinforcement learning is something called the multi-arm bandit problem. That is the same problem and the same scientific algorithms that Google and Amazon use when they're trying to work out what ads to show you when you're clicking. That same statistical machine learning algorithm is at the heart of this trial design.
Tom Averill from the Philadelphia Inquirer asked via email, how do you avoid the problem of being swayed by a false positive? For instance, if an apparent signal with a given approach is randomly high, do you compensate by looking for a larger signal than you would with ordinary clinical trials, maybe at predetermined time points?
So I just want to say that he asked this question, not me. This is getting very technical, but it's a lovely question. So the question that's being asked is, could we accidentally reach a false conclusion? We totally think about that. The design, if you take a roll of the dice, something appears to be looking good, but then a little bit later, turns out that was like an unlucky roll of the dice and it wasn't doing that well, then the trial just drifts back again on that one. And the whole trial design has already factored in ahead of time to make sure that we have all the correct statistical moves for false positives and false negatives.
Thank you. We have enough time to take two more quick questions. We have a follow-up question from John Shumway at KDKA. John, go ahead.
The idea of asking your doctor for hydroxychloroquine, we have heard from many sources, starting with the White House on down, people talking about hydroxychloroquine. Can you blame people for, if they are positive, turning to their doctor and saying, please give me that stuff, I don't care about the studies?
It's not hard to blame anyone for that, given the fears around the disease, the realities that it really can be a terrible illness for people, and to look for something that might help. It's our job to actually find out what really does help and what doesn't hurt. Dr. Angus and I have been in acute care for combined 60, 65 years. I can think of a dozen interventions I was sure would help and not hurt, and we were wrong. So I don't mind people asking about it. We just can't squander this opportunity to really find out the answer now.
Yeah, you're asking essentially, when President Trump said we should just give hydroxychloroquine, and Tony Fauci, the director of NIAID, said, no, we should do a trial. And it's as if you're asking who's right. And we're saying they're both right. We totally understand that we want to do the very best possible treatment for the patient in front of us, but we want to do even better treatment for the patient who comes tomorrow. We have no therapy for this disease. So what we've done here is we've tried to find a design that satisfies the scientific inquiry that Tony Fauci and many of us as clinical scientists want, yet is also done in a way that leans towards the very real tension for clinicians and for patients who want a shot at getting some type of active therapy.
Okay. Thank you. The final question comes from Shannon Perrine, WTAE-TV. Shannon, go ahead.
This is more of just a public health question, and I know we're kind of all Monday morning quarterbacking here and thinking about how we could have stopped the spread over the past months and weeks. Should the world have implemented the stay-at-home lockdown that we're all experiencing right now when this threat was first detected? And could the world have initiated that kind of just stay at home? Would that have stopped this spread?
It's hard to know what would have changed things. But what we do know is that the virus enters different geographic areas at different times and with different intensity. And that singular observation means that one solitary strategy would not likely work at every moment in time and at every location. I can't tell you what the ideal would be for each area. We know that places in Southeast Asia responded differently and were able to control in a different way. There probably is more than one path. What we know here locally is that what we did seems to be having an effect already.
Thank you. And that concludes the time we have allotted. Thank you all for attending. We plan to continue to hold these regular updates for media as long as there is a need. In the meantime, reporters with questions are encouraged to contact our UPMC Media Relations Department at upmc.com/media. Also, please follow @UPMC News on Twitter for timely updates. Again, thank you, doctors, and thank you to the media for attending.